Jakim stood alone in the busy mess hall of the Galactic Alliance Academy. Her tray of food felt heavy in her hands as she looked around for a place to sit. Every table was filled with alien cadets who turned away when she made eye contact. Gia was the first human ever admitted to this famous military school, and no one seemed happy about it. "Is that the human?" a voice whispered loudly enough for her to hear. "She looks so weak," another voice said. "I heard humans can barely lift their own weight," a third voice added with a laugh. Gia tightened her grip on her tray and walked to an empty corner table. She sat down and looked at her food. A strange mix of nutritional items designed to feed all 7 species of the Galactic Alliance. The blue paste tasted like cardboard, but she ate it anyway. She needed the strength. 2 tall Vraxian cadets walked past her table. Each had 4 muscular arms and skin that shimmered like metal in the bright lights. They both stared at her with their 3 yellow eyes before making a gesture that she had learned was a sign of disrespect. "Don't let them bother you," said a voice behind her. Gia turned to see Commander Do, one of the few human instructors at the academy. He was a stern man with gray at his temples who rarely smiled. His uniform displayed more medals than most senior officers. "I wasn't planning to, sir," Gia said, sitting straighter. Commander Do nodded and sat across from her. "Good. They're just afraid." "Afraid? Of me?" Gia almost laughed. The idea that these aliens, each stronger, faster, or smarter than humans, in some way would fear her seemed ridiculous. "Of what you represent," Commander Do explained. "Humans are new to the Alliance. Our planet is in ruins. Our people live in refugee colonies. They think we're weak. They think we don't belong here." He leaned forward. "Prove them wrong." Gia nodded. She had heard these words before. Her parents had said similar things when they saved for years to send her to the academy, working double shifts in the mines of Colony 7 just to pay for her application fee. "My roommate quit," Gia said quietly. "Hana couldn't handle it." Commander Do's face showed no surprise. "Cadet Park was not ready. The question is, are you?" Before Gia could answer, a group of Keltorian cadets walked by. They moved with the fluid grace of their species, each step perfectly balanced. One of them, a female with the name Jin on her uniform, bumped Gia's chair hard enough to spill her drink. "Sorry," Jin said with a smile that showed she wasn't sorry at all. "Didn't see you there. Humans are so small." The other Keltorians laughed as they walked away. Commander Do watched them go. "The combat assessments begin tomorrow," he said, changing the subject. "The Vraxians always take the top spots with their forearms and enhanced strength. The Keltorians usually place next with their superior reflexes." "And where do humans usually place?" Gia asked. Commander Do looked at her directly. "You're the first, Cadet Kim. You tell me." After dinner, Gia returned to her room, empty now that Hana had left. The silence felt heavy. On her desk terminal, messages from home blinked for attention. She opened one from her mother. "We're so proud of you, Gia. Everyone in the colony is watching. Show them what humans can do." No pressure, Gia thought with a sigh. She opened her study files and pulled up information on each alien species in the academy. The Alliance database had limited information on humans, just basic biology and the sad history of how Earth became uninhabitable due to climate disasters and wars. But Gia had something special. Commander Do had given her access to his personal files, detailed notes on each species' physical and mental weaknesses, information not found in the official records. The Vraxians were strong but slow to change, direction during movement. The Keltorians had amazing reflexes but poor endurance. The Octalians could split their attention 8 ways, but struggled with creative thinking. Each species had strengths and weaknesses. "They think they know humans," Commander Do had told her when he shared the files. "Show them how wrong they are." Gia studied late into the night, memorizing fighting styles and techniques. Humans didn't have extra limbs or special abilities, but they had something else: thousands of years of fighting each other. While other species developed technology first, Humans had perfected the art of combat with just 2 arms and 2 legs. Notification chimed on her terminal. The combat assessment pairs had been posted. Gia would face a Vraxian named Tay in her first match. She pulled up his file and studied his previous fights. Tay relied on his upper right arm for most attacks. He was the champion of last year's cadet class. Gia should have felt afraid, but instead, a strange calm settled over her. She had nothing to lose. No one expected her to win. No one expected anything from humans except failure. She closed her eyes and remembered the fighting techniques her grandfather had taught her back on Colony 7. Moves developed on Earth centuries ago. Moves that used an opponent's strength against them. Moves that no alien would have seen before. In the quiet of her room, Gia practiced the forms without moving, just visualizing each step, each counter, each way to turn a Vraxian's forearms from an advantage into a problem. The next morning, Gia woke before dawn. She dressed in her cadet uniform, slightly too big for her human frame, and headed to the training center. The halls were quiet this early, but as she approached the combat arena, she heard voices. Betting pool is up to 500 credits, someone was saying. No one's betting on the human, of course. How long do you think she'll last against Tay? 30 seconds? I give her 15 before she's carried out. Gia paused outside the door, took a deep breath, and straightened her uniform. Then she pushed. The door opened and walked inside with her head high. The room fell silent as everyone turned to look at her. 20 pairs of alien eyes, some with multiple pupils, some with strange colors, all focused on the small human female who dared to think she belonged among them. At the far end of the room, a huge Vraxian cadet was warming up, his 4 arms moving in perfect coordination as he lifted weights that would crush a human. Tay, her opponent. Commander Du stood nearby, watching. When he saw Gia, he gave her a small nod. Gia walked to the preparation area and began her own warm-up routine. Simple stretches, nothing impressive. But in her mind, she was running through every weakness, every opportunity, every way to surprise them all. They thought they knew what humans could do. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The combat arena fell silent as Gia stepped onto the platform. The floor had a soft blue glow that marked the fighting area. Around the edges, other cadets watched with curious eyes and smirking faces. No one believed the human would last more than a few seconds. Tay, her Vraxian opponent, stepped onto the platform across from her. He stood nearly 2 meters tall with 4 muscular arms and metallic skin that gleamed under the lights. His 3 yellow eyes narrowed as he looked down at Gia. I will try not to damage you permanently, human, Tay said. His voice sounded like stones grinding together. It would be bad for my record. Gia said nothing. She kept her breathing steady and her stance relaxed, just as her grandfather had taught her. Show nothing, give away nothing. Senior instructor, June walked to the edge of the platform. He was from a species called the Maurician, known for their strict fairness. His skin was deep purple, and his eyes had no pupils. This is a standard combat assessment, Instructor June announced. Victory is achieved by pinning your opponent for 3 seconds or forcing them out of the marked area. No serious injuries allowed. He looked at both cadets. Are you ready? Tay flexed all 4 of his arms in a show of strength. Ready. Ready, Gia said quietly. Begin, announced Instructor June, stepping back. Tay moved forward with surprising speed for his size. His lower right arm swung toward Gia's head in what would have been a finishing blow if it had connected. But Gia wasn't there anymore. She had studied Vraxian fighting styles. They always led with their lower right arm, confident in their strength. They never expected anyone to move toward them. Instead of backing away, Gia stepped inside Tay's reach. She grabbed his extended arm and used his own momentum against him. With a technique her grandfather called the willow bends, she twisted and pulled. The crowd gasped as the much larger alien suddenly flipped through the air and landed hard on his back. The impact shook the entire platform. Tay lay there for a moment, all 3 eyes wide with shock. Then he roared and jumped back to his feet, all 4 arms now swinging in a dangerous pattern. Gia dodged 2 strikes, blocked another with her forearm, and ducked under the fourth. Each movement was precise, using as little energy as possible. While Tay used his strength to power each attack, Jia used his own force against him. "What is she doing?" one of the Keltorian cadets whispered loudly. "I've never seen anyone fight like that." From the side of the room, Commander Du spoke quietly to another instructor. Human fighting styles, developed over thousands of years of fighting each other instead of developing technology. They never needed to record them in the Alliance database. Tay was growing frustrated. His attacks became wilder, less controlled. Jia waited for her moment. When he overextended with all 4 arms at once, she moved in. A quick strike to a pressure point in his lower left arm, a sweep of his legs, a precise hit to his center of balance. The Vraxian toppled again, landing at the very edge of the platform. But this time Jia followed him down, using her body weight to pin one of his arms while applying pressure to a nerve cluster in his neck, another technique not found in any Alliance combat manual. Instructor June counted 1, 2, 3. The Tiu match was over. The human had won. The arena was completely silent. Then slow murmurs spread through the crowd as Jia stood and offered a hand to help Tay up. He ignored it and rose on his own, his 3 eyes burning with shame and anger. "Next match," Instructor June called, his voice betraying no surprise at the outcome. Jia's next opponent was a Keltorian named Su. Her species was known for lightning-fast reflexes and perfect balance. She smiled at Jia with too many teeth. "Lucky move with Tay," Su said. "Luck won't help you against me." When the match began, Su moved so quickly she seemed to blur. But Jia had studied Keltorians too. Their reflexes were amazing, but they had patterns. They relied on speed over strength. Jia took 3 hard hits before she found the pattern. Then she struck. Not where Su was, but where she would be in the next movement. The Keltorian ran directly into Jia's extended arm and fell back, stunned. The match ended with Su pinned in the center of the platform, her perfect balance used against her. By midday, Jia had faced 3 more opponents. An Octalian who could split his attention 8 ways but couldn't adapt when Jia changed tactics mid-fight. A Mauritian who fought with perfect form but couldn't handle Jia's unpredictable movements. And a Bentari whose 6 legs gave them stability, but too many limbs to protect. Jia won every match. When the preliminary rankings were posted on the main screen, the name Kim Jia Human appeared in 5th place out of 50 cadets. It was unprecedented. No one had expected a human to rank higher than the bottom tier. The whispers changed from mockery to suspicion. "She must be cheating somehow," one cadet said. "Maybe humans have hidden abilities they didn't tell the Alliance about," suggested another. "Perhaps she has cybernetic enhancements," a third added. Commander Du watched it all with a small smile on his normally stern face. He had known what humans were capable of. Now everyone else was learning too. That evening, Jia walked back to her quarters with muscles aching but her head held high. For the first time since arriving at the academy, other cadets nodded to her in the hallways. It wasn't friendship, but it was acknowledgement. It was a start. As she rounded a corner near her room, she found her path blocked by a group of 5 cadets. Jin, the Keltorian who had bumped her chair in the mess hall, stood in front. "We need to talk, human," Jin said, her voice cold. The others formed a half-circle, blocking any escape route. There was Tai, the Vraxian she had defeated first. Next to him stood 2 Octalians and another Keltorian. "About what?" Jia asked, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. "About how you cheated today," Jin said, stepping closer. "There's no way a human could defeat a Vraxian in fair combat. No way you could beat a Keltorian's reflexes." "I didn't cheat," Jia said. "I just fought differently than what you're used to." Tay moved forward, his forearms flexing. "Show us these techniques. Now, prove you didn't use hidden technology." Jia realized they weren't just angry. They were curious. Beneath their hostility was confusion. They truly couldn't understand how she had won. "Fine," Gia said, "but not in the hallway." She led them to a small practice room nearby. It was empty this late in the evening. The blue glow of a practice mat lit the space. "Attack me," she said to Jin. "One at a time. I'll show you exactly how I did it." Jin hesitated, then nodded to the other Keltorian. "Day, you first." Day stepped onto the mat and took a fighting stance. His movements were beautiful, perfectly balanced. "The problem with perfect balance," Gia explained as she circled him, "is that it only works when you know what's coming." When Day attacked, Gia didn't use any of the standard Alliance defensive moves. Instead, she used an ancient human martial art her grandfather had called Aikido. She redirected Day's energy, using his perfect balance against him until he found himself thrown to the mat. "Your turn," she said to Jin. One by one, she demonstrated with each of them. Not her full techniques. She wasn't foolish enough to reveal all her secrets, but enough to show that what she had done was skill, not trickery. Even Tay took a turn. When she flipped him again using his forearms as leverage points, his eyes showed something new. Respect. "These are not Alliance fighting techniques," Jin said after Gia had thrown her for the second time. "No," Gia agreed. "They're human techniques, developed over thousands of years of humans fighting other humans." The group fell silent, absorbing this information. Finally, Jin spoke again. "Then challenge me again," Gia said, her voice steady despite her fatigue. "Tomorrow, the next day, whenever you want. I'll show you exactly how I did it. No tricks. Just human skill against Keltorian skill." Jin stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Tomorrow. Extra practice session." As the group filed out, Tay lingered behind. The huge Vraxian looked down at Gia with his 3 yellow eyes. "You fought well, human," he said simply. Then he too left. Alone in the practice room, Gia finally allowed herself to smile. It wasn't acceptance, not yet, but it was the beginning of something. A chance to prove that humans belonged here among the stars. The academy buzzed with rumors about Gia Kim. In the week since the combat assessments, the whispers had changed. No one mocked the human cadet anymore. Instead, they watched her with curious eyes and careful distance. Some said humans had hidden cybernetic enhancements. Others claimed they had secret telepathic abilities the Alliance didn't know about. A few even suggested that humans had been hiding their true potential for years, pretending to be weaker than they were. Commander Du watched it all with quiet satisfaction. He had known what humans could do all along. Now everyone else was starting to see it too. Gia walked into the advanced flight class and took her seat near the back. The other cadets still kept their distance, but not from disgust anymore. Now it was caution. The human had surprised them once. They weren't eager for it to happen again. Instructor Suk entered the room. She was Merisian, like Instructor June, with deep purple skin and pupilless eyes. But while June was stern, Suk had a reputation for being even stricter. "Today we begin flight simulator training," Instructor Suk announced. "You will pilot a standard Alliance fighter through an asteroid field while under enemy fire. This tests your spatial awareness, reflexes, and tactical thinking simultaneously." At the front of the room stood a large pod with a semi-transparent cover. Inside were complex controls designed to accommodate all 7 species of the Alliance. "The Octalian cadets typically excel at this exercise," Instructor Suk continued. "Their split consciousness allows them to track multiple threats at once. The current academy record is held by Graduate Yun, an Octalian who completed the course in 4 minutes and 12 seconds. She looked around the room, her eyes stopping on Gia. "Cadet Kim, you're first," said Instructor Suk, a challenge in her voice. The room went silent. Everyone turned to look at Gia. This was clearly meant to put her in her place. After her surprising combat scores, the instructor seemed determined to show that humans couldn't excel at everything. Gia stood and walked to the simulator pod. Her heart beat fast, but her face stayed calm. What the others didn't know was that, on Earth, flight simulators had been common entertainment. Gia had spent countless hours on them growing up in the refugee colony. While other kids played outside, she had piloted virtual ships through virtual skies. The simulator pod closed around her. The control panel lit up with dozens of buttons, switches, and screens. Some were designed for 4 arms, others for species with different visual ranges. Gia quickly found the controls best suited for human hands. Beginning simulation in 3, 2, 1. Instructor Sook's voice came through the speakers. The view screen in front of Gia lit up. She was in space at the edge of a dense asteroid field. Red dots on her radar showed enemy fighters approaching from behind. Gia's hands moved with practiced ease. The ship responded to her touch, diving into the asteroid field. Most pilots would have gone around it or taken a careful path through. Gia went straight in. Outside the pod, the other cadets watched on the large screen as Gia's ship wove between massive rocks with barely any space to spare. "What is she doing?" Jin whispered to Tay. "No one goes that deep into the field." The enemy. Fighters followed her. 2 crashed into asteroids almost immediately, unable to match her tight turns. The others fired their weapons, filling the space with energy blasts. Gia didn't just dodge the attacks. She used the asteroids as shields, positioning herself so that when the enemies fired, they often hit the rocks instead. Then she would loop around, using the asteroids for cover, and emerge behind her pursuers. In the classroom, the cadets watched, in stunned silence as Gia's ship danced through space. It wasn't just surviving, it was hunting. One by one, she eliminated the enemy ships, using the environment as a weapon. When the last enemy exploded, Gia guided her ship out of the asteroid field and toward the finish point. The simulation ended. The pod opened. Instructor Sook stood there, her face showing no emotion. But the large screen behind her told the story. The time glowed in bright numbers, 3 minutes and 27 seconds. Nearly a full minute faster than the Academy record. "How?" asked Min, an Octalian cadet, his 8 eyes blinking in confusion. "Humans don't have split consciousness. You can't track multiple objects at once like we can." Gia stepped out of the pod, her legs a little shaky from the intense focus. "We don't need to," she said. "Humans spent centuries flying aircraft on Earth before we had computers to help us. We learned to feel the ship, to predict movements instead of just reacting to them." "But the enemies were shooting at you," said Jin. "You couldn't have predicted where their shots would go." "I didn't need to," Gia explained. "I just needed to make sure I was never where they would expect me to be." Commander Du, who had entered the room during the simulation, nodded slightly from the doorway. This was what he had been waiting for, not just for Gia to succeed, but for her to help the others understand how humans thought. "Humans don't have split consciousness or extra limbs," Gia continued, feeling a surge of pride. "We just have a lot of practice making the most of what we do have." Instructor Sook cleared her throat. "Next cadet." As Gia returned to her seat, she noticed something different. The cadets around her didn't move away. Instead, several of them leaned closer. "Could you show me that turn you did near the large asteroid?" asked Sue, a Keltorian who had been in her combat assessment. "And that targeting technique," added Min, the Octalian. "You fired before your computer had a lock. How?" For the first time since arriving at the Academy, Gia felt a shift in how the others saw her, not as an outsider, not as a novelty, but as someone with knowledge worth having. Later that day, Gia sat in the study hall working on a tactical problem when Commander Du approached her table. "Your simulator run is the talk of the Academy," he said, sitting across from her. Gia nodded. "They're surprised." As they should be. Commander Do's normally stern face showed a hint of a smile. "But they're still missing the point." "Which is?" "That it's not about better reflexes or multiple arms or split consciousness," he said. "It's about how humans think differently. We had to be creative to survive on Earth. We had to adapt constantly. That's our strength." Gia considered this. "Some of them are starting to ask me for help," she said. "Is that allowed?" "Not only allowed," Commander Du replied. "It's exactly what I was hoping for." He leaned forward. "The Alliance needs what humans can offer, Cadet Kim. Not just our physical abilities, but our perspective. Before Gia could respond, a group of cadets entered the study hall. Jin led them, her Keltorian grace evident in every movement. With her were Tae, Min, and several others who had previously avoided Gia. They approached her table hesitantly. "We've been talking," Jin said, her voice different than before, less hostile, more uncertain. "About your combat techniques and your flying today." Gia waited, unsure where this was going. "I've been watching how you solve problems," Jin admitted. "It's different. Would you be willing to teach me some of your techniques?" The other cadets nodded in agreement. Even Tae, the proud Vraxian, seemed interested. Commander Du stood and nodded to Gia. "I'll leave you to it, cadet." As he walked away, she could have sworn he was smiling. Gia looked at the group of alien cadets, species she had studied as opponents just weeks ago. Now they were looking at her not with mockery or suspicion, but with genuine interest. "Sit down," she said, making room at her table. "Let's start with the basics." As they gathered around, Gia realized something important. She wasn't just representing herself anymore. She was representing all of humanity. And maybe, just maybe, she was helping to build the real purpose of the Alliance. Different species learning from each other, becoming stronger together than they ever could be apart. As the semester progressed, Gia's success continued. She wasn't the best at everything. Her strength couldn't match a Vraxian's, her reflexes weren't as fast as a Keltorian's, but her adaptability and creativity consistently put her near the top of every class. The study group that had formed around her grew larger each week. What began with Jin, Tae, and Min soon included cadets from all 7 species of the Alliance. They met in the evenings in a small practice room that Commander Do had arranged for them to use. "The key to human martial arts," Gia explained one evening, demonstrating a stance to the group, "is using your opponent's energy against them. We don't try to be stronger. We redirect." Tae, the large Vraxian, attempted to copy her movement. His forearms made the simple stance look awkward. "I don't understand," he said, his yellow eyes narrowed in concentration. "With my strength, why would I need to redirect?" "Because someday you might face an opponent who is stronger," Gia said, "or you might be injured and lose your strength. Humans learn to fight as if we always have a disadvantage, because on Earth we often did." Jin, who had become one of Gia's most dedicated students, nodded in understanding. "It's about not relying only on your natural abilities." "Exactly," Gia said. "Now, let me show you a technique my grandfather taught me. It works against opponents, twice your size." As she demonstrated the move, Gia thought about how much had changed. 3 months ago, these cadets had mocked her. Now they gathered around her, eager to learn. It wasn't just the combat techniques they wanted. After each session, they would ask her questions about human history, human cultures, human ways of thinking. In return, Gia learned from them too. Jin taught her Keltorian pressure points that could temporarily disable an opponent's limb with just a touch. Min showed her Octalian meditation techniques that helped with focus during chaotic situations. Even Tae shared Vraxian strength exercises that helped Gia build her endurance. Commander Du observed their sessions from time to time, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. This was exactly what the Alliance needed: true cooperation, not just coexistence. One evening after practice, Jin stayed behind to help Gia clean up the room. "I want to apologize," Jin said suddenly. Gia looked up, surprised. "For what?" "For how I treated you when you first arrived." Jin's eyes, bright, gold like all Keltorians, showed genuine regret. "I believed what everyone said about humans, that you were primitive, that you didn't belong in the Alliance." Gia nodded slowly. "And now?" "Now I think the Alliance needs humans more than humans need the Alliance," Jin said. "Your species thinks differently. You solve problems in ways that wouldn't occur to the rest of us." Before Gia could respond, her communication device chimed. A message from Commander Do appeared on the screen. "Report to the main hall immediately. Hall cadets." Jin's device chimed a moment later with the same message. "What's happening?" Gia asked as they hurried down the hallway together. "I don't know," Jin replied. Academy-wide meetings are rare. When they reached the main hall, it was already filled with cadets from all years of the academy. Jia and Jin found spots near Tai, whose height made him easy to spot in the crowd. What's going on? Jin asked him. The Vraxian shrugged his four shoulders. Some kind of announcement. Admiral Gi, the highest-ranking officer in the academy, stepped onto the raised platform at the front of the room. Silence fell immediately. The admiral was Keltorian like Jin, but much older, with silver streaks in his fur and eyes that had seen decades of service. Cadets, Admiral Gi began, his voice strong, despite his age. I have an important announcement regarding your final assessment. Murmurs spread through the crowd. The final assessment wasn't supposed to happen for another month. Due to developing situations at the borders of Alliance space, we are moving the assessment forward. It will begin 3 days from now. The murmurs grew louder. 3 days was very little time to prepare. This year's assessment will be different, Admiral G continued. Instead of individual tests, you will work in teams. He gestured, and a large screen behind him lit up, showing a list of names grouped into teams of 5. These teams have been carefully selected to balance strengths and weaknesses. Each team will face a series of challenges designed to test every aspect of your training. Jia scanned the screen, looking for her name. She found it under Team 7. Below her name were 4 others, Jin, Tae, Min, and Su. She knew all of them from her study group. Team assignments are final, Admiral Gi said firmly, stopping several cadets who had begun to protest. This is not a popularity contest. In real missions, you don't choose your squad mates. You work with who you have. Jin leaned closer to Jia. We're together, she whispered. That's good. Jia nodded, but she wasn't so sure. Being teamed with the cadet she knew best seemed too convenient. She suspected Commander Do had influenced the selections. Each team will navigate a simulated crisis on Training Moon Alpha, Admiral G explained. The scenario involves a colony in danger, hostile forces, and environmental hazards. You will be graded on completion time, civilian survival rate, team coordination, and adherence to Alliance protocols. The screen changed to show an image of Training Moon Alpha, a small rocky satellite that orbited the gas giant near the Academy. It had been terraformed to provide various environments for training exercises. Team leaders have been selected, based on academic standing. Admiral Gi continued. They will be responsible for mission planning and execution. He gestured again, and the screen showed a list of team leaders. Next to Team 7 was the name. Kim, JIA, human. The room went completely silent. Then whispers began, spreading like wildfire. A human team leader? That's never happened before. Is this some kind of test? Jia felt a moment of panic. She looked around for Commander Do but couldn't see him in the crowd of instructors at the side of the room. Team leaders report to Briefing Room 12 immediately after this assembly for additional information, Admiral Guy said. The rest of you report to your usual instructors for team preparation. Dismissed. As cadets began to file out of the hall, Jia's team gathered around her. Congratulations, team leader, Tae said. To her surprise, there was no resentment in his voice. I didn't ask for this, Jia said quietly. But you earned it, Jin replied. Your overall scores are higher than any of ours. Min and Su nodded in agreement. Their acceptance should have made Jia feel better, but instead, it added to the weight of responsibility she suddenly felt. This is going to be interesting, Jin said, their earlier friendship still evident despite the new chain of command. Later, in Briefing Room 12, Jia sat with the other team leaders as they received additional information about the final assessment. Most of them were Keltorians or Vraxians with a few Octalians and Marisians. She was the only human. The scenario is this, said Instructor June, pointing to a detailed map of Training Moon Alpha. A research colony has been attacked. There are survivors hiding in various locations. Hostile forces remain in the area. Your mission is to rescue all survivors and secure the colony. He began listing the resources each team would have. 1 transport ship, limited weapons, medical supplies, communication equipment. As he spoke, Gia's mind was already working, thinking of ways to approach the problem that might not occur to the other teams. When the briefing ended, the team leaders filed out. Several of them gave Gia curious looks, but none spoke to her directly. The competition had begun. She found her team waiting in their assigned preparation room. They stood when she entered, showing respect for her position as leader. So, Sue asked, "What's the plan, team leader?" Gia took a deep breath. "The plan is that we're going to forget everything we've been taught about Standard Alliance protocols." Their eyes widened in surprise. "Instead," Gia continued with growing confidence, "we're going to combine what each of us knows best: human adaptability, Keltorian precision, Vraxian strength, Octalian awareness. We're going to show them what a real alliance looks like." As her team leaned in to hear more, Gia felt something shift inside her. She wasn't just a human cadet proving herself anymore. She was a leader forging something new, a true alliance of different abilities and perspectives, working together as one. The transport ship descended through the thin atmosphere of Training Moon Alpha. Through the view screen, Gia could see the rocky landscape below. Scattered among the red stones were small white buildings, the research colony they were supposed to rescue. "Landing zone is hot," Min reported from the sensor station. His 8 eyes were focused on different screens, using the Octalian ability to split attention. "I count 12 hostiles near our designated landing area." Gia nodded. All around her. Her team was preparing for the mission. Jin checked her medical kit while Sue calibrated the communication devices. Tay stood near the weapons locker, his forearms loading and checking equipment with smooth efficiency. "We're going with Plan C," Gia announced. They had prepared 3 different plans. Plan A followed Standard Alliance protocols: land at the designated spot, secure a perimeter, then move out in formation to locate survivors. It was what every team would be doing. Plan B was more aggressive, a direct assault to clear the hostiles quickly. Plan C was pure Gia. It was the kind of thinking that had helped her defeat opponents in the combat arena and break records in the flight simulator. "Tay, take us in," she ordered. The Vraxian moved to the pilot seat. His 4 hands worked the controls with precision. "Where am I landing?" he asked. "Not the designated zone, I assume." "No," Gia said. "See that ridgeline to the north? Put us down behind it. The sensors won't be able to track us there." Tay smiled, showing his pointed teeth. "Sneaky. I like it." The ship changed course, moving away from where the other teams would be landing. Minutes later, they touched down in the shadow of a tall ridge, completely hidden from the colony. "Suits on," Gia ordered. "Remember, this may be a simulation, but the environmental hazards are real." They each put on protective suits designed to handle the thin air and cold temperatures of the training moon. Their helmets connected to a shared communication system that Min had modified according to Gia's instructions. "Comms check," Jin said as they prepared to exit the ship. One by one, they confirmed their systems were working. Then Gia laid out a small device on the floor, a holographic projector showing a map of the colony. "The other teams will be engaging the hostiles directly," she explained. "That's what the simulation expects, but we're going to approach it differently." She pointed to several locations on the map. "The civilian shelters are here, here, and here. Based on the briefing, there should be 20 survivors in total. Our mission is to rescue them, not to defeat every hostile." "So we bypass the fight completely?" Sue asked, her Keltorian reflexes making her fidget with excitement. "Exactly," Gia said. "Min, you'll use your split consciousness to keep track of both the hostiles and our team members. Jin and Sue, you'll locate and treat any injured civilians. Tay, you'll handle any obstacles we encounter. I'll coordinate and navigate." They nodded, each understanding their role. "What about Alliance protocols?" Jin asked. "We're supposed to follow standard rescue procedures. Admiral Guy said we would be graded on completion time, civilian survival rate, team coordination, and adherence to protocols," Gia reminded them. "If our completion time is fast enough and our survival rate is high enough, the protocol score won't matter as much." They exited the ship and began moving across the rocky terrain. The gravity on training Moon Alpha was slightly lower than on the Academy planet, making their steps lighter. Gia led them along a path that kept the ridge between them and the colony. Hostiles are engaging with Team 2 and Team 4, Min reported, his eyes focused on a small sensor device. They have no idea we're here. When they reached the end of the ridge, Gia signaled for them to stop. Below them, they could see the colony, a cluster of white buildings surrounded by a low wall. Figures in red suits moved around the perimeter. These were the training drones programmed to act as hostiles. There's the first shelter, Gia said, pointing to a building on the edge of the colony. It's the least guarded. We go there first. Using the terrain for cover, they worked their way down to the colony wall. The sounds of weapons fire could be heard from the other side of the settlement, where the other teams were engaging the hostiles directly. Tay used his Vraxian strength to create a small opening in the wall. One by one, they slipped through. 3 civilians in the building ahead, Min whispered, his sensor device scanning through the walls. No hostiles nearby. They moved quickly to the building. Jin and Sue entered first, while Tay and Gia stood, guard outside. Min continued monitoring the hostile positions. Minutes later, Jin and Sue emerged with 3 figures in civilian dress, training mannequins programmed to simulate injured colonists. 2 minor injuries, 1 serious, Jin reported. We've stabilized them. Good, Gia said. Min, where's the next shelter? The Octalian guided them through the colony, avoiding the areas where fighting was taking place. They reached the second shelter and rescued 7 more civilians, then the third with 5 more. That's 15, Gia counted. There should be 5 more somewhere. Min frowned, all 8 of his eyes blinking in confusion. The sensors aren't showing any more shelters, Gia thought quickly. The briefing had mentioned 20 survivors, but they had only found 15. Where would the others be? Then she remembered something from Earth history, a story her grandfather had told her about underground shelters used during war times. They're below us, she said suddenly. Check for underground structures. Min adjusted his sensor and gasped. You're right. There's a basement level under the main research building. 5 life signs. The main research building was in the center of the colony, surrounded by the heaviest concentration of hostiles. The other teams were still engaged in fighting around the perimeter, drawing most of the hostiles away, but there were still 4 guarding the main entrance. We need a distraction, Gia said. Tay grinned. Let me handle that. The Vraxian took several small devices from his pack, flash grenades designed to confuse sensors and optics. He threw them with perfect accuracy to locations far from the main building. When they exploded in bright flashes, the hostiles moved to investigate. Now, Gia ordered. They rushed to the main building and found the entrance to the underground level. The 5 remaining civilians were there, one of them programmed to be critically injured. Let's move, Gia said after Jin and Sue had treated the injuries. Back to our ship the same way we came in. They retraced their steps, moving carefully along the edges of the colony. The sounds of battle were beginning to die down as the other teams completed their objectives. When they reached their ship, they loaded all 20 civilians aboard and took off, heading back to the Academy landing zone. Mission complete, Gia announced. Time? 43 minutes, Min reported. That has to be a record. It was. The previous record for the final assessment was 1 hour and 12 minutes. They had completed it nearly 30 minutes faster. When they landed at the Academy, Commander Du was waiting for them. His usually stern face showed open pride as they disembarked with all 20 civilians safe. Report, he said formally, though his eyes told Gia he already knew they had succeeded. Team 7 completed the mission with 100% civilian recovery and 0 team casualties, Gia reported. We encountered no direct hostile engagement. Commander Du raised an eyebrow. No engagement? How did you manage that? We went around them, sir, Gia explained. The mission was to rescue civilians, not defeat hostiles. A small smile appeared on Commander Du's face. Exactly the point that most teams miss. He nodded to them. Well done. Report for debriefing in 1 hour. When the final scores were tallied the next day, Team 7 had shattered all previous Records. Their completion time, civilian survival rate, and team coordination scores were the highest ever recorded. Their protocol adherence score was low, but as Gia had predicted, it wasn't enough to affect their overall standing. At the graduation ceremony 3 days later, Admiral G addressed the assembled cadets personally. "This year has taught us all something valuable," he said, his gaze finding Gia in the crowd. "The Galactic Alliance was formed on the principle that diversity makes us stronger. Cadet Kim and her team have proven that principle correct in the most dramatic fashion possible." As Gia accepted her officer's insignia, she caught Commander Do's eye. He gave her a subtle nod, a gesture that said more than words ever could. She wasn't just representing herself anymore, she was representing all of humanity. "Lieutenant Kim," Admiral G said, using her new rank, "the Alliance needs officers who can think differently. You've been assigned to the flagship as tactical officer." Whispers spread through the assembly. The flagship assignment was normally reserved for graduates with years of experience, not freshly commissioned officers. As she stepped back into line, Gia noticed something remarkable. The cadets who had once mocked her now stood at attention, offering the highest form of respect in the Alliance military tradition. One by one, they placed their right hand over their heart, or whatever organ their species had in that location. Gia returned the gesture, feeling a sense of completion. She had changed everything, not just for herself, but for every human who would follow. In a galaxy full of beings with more limbs, more senses, and more natural abilities, humans had found their place. Not because they were stronger or faster or smarter, but because they were different. Because they